Welcome, everybody, to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. This is a special season dedicated to the tribe of the mother. But also, I know any mothers listening will find this extremely valuable. I've created each episode to offer simple, digestible, and supportive information, which I hope will educate and inspire anyone who listens. So, this is by popular demand. Please help us to educate and support the tribe holding the mother. Look forward to passionate and highly knowledgeable guests dedicated to reclaiming the essence of birth and embracing conscious parenting. Throughout our time together, our guests will serve as the guiding voices, illuminating the path towards a deeper understanding of preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. This is with the mother and the baby being the center of the exploration. In the show notes, you'll discover the link to Nourished Mother package, which will offer many different resources to complement each episode. This is free for all members in the Women's Circle, or £33 for everybody who just wants to purchase the package. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible guests and immense gratitude to my partner for supporting me on this creation. And finally, last but not least, special thank you to Araya, my daughter, for being an endless well of inspiration. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Danielle, your host. We are in season 7 and we're currently exploring preconception. Today we have two special guests, Alexandra and Sjanie, who are the co-founders of Red School and co-authors of the iconic and hugely celebrated book from Hay House, Wild Power. Discover the magic of the menstrual cycle and awaken the feminine path to power. And their latest book, Wise Power. Discover the liberating power of menopause to awaken authority, purpose, and belonging. They are pioneering the new emerging field of menstruation awareness, creating a new path for women to walk along and tap into their creative power and into their leadership. Between them, they bring over 45 years of experience, and today they teach worldwide on the psycho-spiritual process of maturation that unfolds from menarche to menopause and beyond. Their work has supported so many on their journey, including myself when I first found Wild Power in 2017. And I share in this episode how their book saved me in so many ways. I was given a helping hand at the exact right time, and it helped me to remember so much. And the journey back to my body, back to my menstrual cycle was so emotional, such a homecoming. And I always recommend this book to anyone who's just putting their toe into the water with this, because even though as the book unfolds, you go into the deeper layers of your being, but I found it was in such a way that I felt supported and held. And the information comes so beautifully in a way that I wanted to stay and read it. It didn't make me want to close down and run away. Today, we're going to talk about how the menstrual cycle goes beyond biology, how it's a journey that encompasses spirituality and physiology. We explore how the menstrual cycle serves as a profound psycho-spiritual practice, guiding us through shifts in energy and mindsets throughout each phase. From the fertile energy of ovulation to the journeying inwards during menstruation. Each stage offers us unique insights and opportunities for growth, and to get to know ourselves more deeply so that we can realign with our truth. And through this preconception phase on the podcast, we are going into the physiological needs of the body for preconception. But I find to get into the psycho-spiritual aspect of our menstrual cycle, we're able to hold space for everything that arises. And we talk about these rites of passage. As I mentioned in the beginning, Wild Power was the first book that I read, which was all about the menstrual cycle. But then they went on to write Wise Power, which is all about the transition into menopause. And we talk about how, as we reclaim back our menstrual cycle, it acts as a womb continuum for the next phase to come, whether it's through pregnancy, whether it's through menopause, whether it's nearing the time of our death. By getting to know the language of our body and embracing these natural rhythms, we bring back the power so that we can navigate these life transitions with grace and so much beauty. I absolutely love the work that they're doing, and you can find the links to their Instagram and their website and all their offerings in the show notes. They also have their own podcast so that you can tune in every week if this is where you're at and you want to have it at the forefront of your mind and you want to go deeper with this. So let's take a moment to tune into our body. If you notice that your body is crunched up, maybe your back is arched and your tailbone is tucked under, to see how with the next inhale you can make some space from the tailbone to the crown of the head so that all the organs have a space to breathe, a space to be nourished. And on the next exhale, feel your body soften, just resting on your bones, being here to receive this wisdom. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoy this episode. I'd love to just ask you, firstly, how's it going with the release of the new book? Because I first found out about you both and I worked out today, I must have just got your book, Wild Power, when it first came out. So in like 2017, was that the first time it was released?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was recommended to read this book by Uma, who wrote Yoni Shakti. I went to one of her retreats and she was recommending this book. So I got it straight away. I was in London and I went and got it, but I didn't realize like it probably just come out at the time. And it changed my life. Like that week with all this information with that book, I was just blown away because I had never, ever spent time with my menstrual cycle. I'd been on the pill since the age of 13 years old. And at that point, I don't know how old that would have made me in 2017, but it's like early 20s. And for once, I had some wisdom with me to say there is another way. And it made me feel so hopeful. And I can really clearly remember the moment of awakening. And I was walking through the streets of London and I just felt like I wasn't alone anymore. And I felt so excited for life. And that was like, it was more than just like some information coming through. It was life-saving because I had gone through so much depression throughout my life. And then for this one moment in time, I was like, wow, life is about to change. So thank you so much. Wow, from the bottom of my heart for creating that book.
Wow, that is such a beautiful story. I've never actually heard anyone say it. I've heard people say a lot of amazing things about their discovery of the power of the menstrual cycle, but I've never heard anyone say, I realized for the first time that I was not alone. That is such a beautiful way of putting it because it's true. When we awaken to the power of our menstrual cycle, we realize that there is this intelligence inside us that is holding us and guiding us. It's not like an abstract thing anymore. It's a very real, felt, embodied, alive, true. You just know it in your bones. It's not like somebody telling you something you don't know. So that is such a beautiful way of putting it. I'm just really touched to hear that, Danielle. Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
It got me too, actually, Danielle, that same line. Yeah. Wow. I thought, oh, wow. Yes, that would be the deepest message, actually, of that book. And equally, I actually feel incredibly touched by it. And equally, it is, I would say, the deepest message of our menopause book, Wise Power, which came out 2022, didn't it? Just a year and a half ago. There's a similar kind of energy that when we were writing Wise, we really wanted to communicate again that there is this meaningful process at work, that menopause is actually on your side. It's holding you. There's a process you have to go through that's meaningful, that is actually leading you into the most extraordinary awakening to yourself. And it is initiatory and it is challenging. Psychospiritually, it's challenging because it's waking you up to something very potent within you. But it is this idea that there's a meaningful something at work that's unfolding, that's leading you somewhere, and which echoes really the process of the menstrual cycle over your menstruating years, which that you tasted and now are in the flow.
You asked the question, how's it going since our new book came out? And what's been so interesting, Danielle, is because there has been such a kind of uproar around menopause, and so many people have been suffering from kind of symptoms, from health challenges going through menopause, it's in a way met a need. And the need is one which we often say with all this work, and it's true of the menstrual cycle as well, is that the kind of louder the symptoms, the bigger the power that's trying to wake up. When there's a lot of disturbance that happens with something, it's because there is this power that is wanting out, that isn't recognized, isn't dignified, isn't held and understood, which is why so many people experience period pain. And also why there's so much fallout around the whole birth experience as well, I should just say. But yeah, so that's definitely been true of menopause. And so what's happened is our book about the power of menopause has actually landed in a very fertile world. It was really the right time for it, because people have been suffering. And to have our message, which tells an entirely new story about menopause as being a process of awakening and a process of coming into power and being liberated in terms of who you are, I think people have just been, all the feedback we've had is that people have just been drinking it up. They're like, oh, thank God, not everyone's just talking about how to cope with hot flushes and how it's just some menopause, something you've just got to get through. People are starting to talk about what's really going on here. So it speaks to a very deep place in people. And I imagine that there are people out there like you, Danielle, who have found like a kind of home in hearing the story of the initiation of menopause, and not just that it's a health crisis that you have to deal with. Yeah,
Wow,
it's
I have
been good.
goosebumps. I have goosebumps because I know what you've just mentioned is a common story of getting to this time and then feeling like, oh, I've got all this now that I have to deal with. I've just got to this point in my life and I have to deal with this. Oh, and I just know now from going through this initiation and like reclaiming back my menstrual cycle and doing regression work to be with myself when I first started my period. And just, I hold circles to do that as well, to reclaim menarche, to talk about menstrual cycle. And every single time I learn something else about myself, but there's something like deeper healing that happens. My younger self is like, oh, wow. Like, we're not alone. Like, I always get that feeling like, not alone. We're together, we're in circle. And it is, there's a kind of a sadness in it. And I hold the sadness and also the joy that it's all coming to the surface now. So people can have this information and it's not a taboo topic. And I noticed because when I gave birth, a lot came up for me, a lot for 28 hours. Like the last 6 hours was insanely intense, so much coming up. And on reflection, I realized I missed 10 years of my life with my cycle. So I didn't get to practice being with her wisdom and learning how to rest and receive. And so it is so interesting to then go into the next, think about the next stage that's coming and also be excited for it. Like, what is in store for that? So thank you so much for bringing this to the world. It really is needed.
You're very welcome. Definitely.
Let's go into thinking and talking about preconception. So, this conversation really is for any woman in her years when she's menstruating, and whether they choose to have a child or not. But there is so much that our menstrual cycle can bring in these times. So, could you just begin to share a little bit about our natural rhythm during the times that we're menstruating?
Yeah, you go for this one, Alexandra. Pass this all to you. Good one.
Yes. It's a bit of a leading question. I'll have to try and contain it. Could be a very big answer. But so I'm going to just really bring it in now and talk about, in very sort of simple terms, but very profound terms, about what the menstrual cycle, what bringing awareness to our menstrual cycles can begin to do within us, grow in us. So I think of the menstrual cycle as this, at a very basic level, it is this it's the foundation for being. It is the moment you step onto the path of menstrual cycle awareness, you're stepping into a deeper connection with yourself. It's cycle awareness is like having this, it's like the umbilical cord to hold it, the umbilical cord to the deep self. It's your connection in to the mothership of you. So you're orbiting out here in your daily life, trying to cope with all the stuff of the life of life and all that it throws at you and all its expectations of you and how you're supposed to be and should be, etc. And then, when you start to practice menstrual cycle awareness, you are brought into the rhythm of you, the deep rhythm of you. And truly, it is like having this. I'm going to use umbilical cord because we're talking about pregnancy. This umbilical cord to the mothership of you, of who you truly are. And of course, it's a process that happens over time, that connection of deepening in and deepening in. So, on a very basic level, when you practice, and I'll say more about just what it means to practice, what you're doing when you're practicing menstrual cycle awareness. But what's happening when you are doing it is you're pacing your actual energy, your needs, your emotions, and the state of your nervous system. You're tapping into yourself. You're more connected to yourself. So you're just more dropped in, more connected to what you're actually feeling, who you are actually in the moment, what your nervous system is actually, and so on and so forth. And so cycle awareness is this art and practice of pacing yourself, your energy, your nervous system, your feelings, your needs. And that is why we call it the foundational self-care practice for anyone with a menstrual cycle. And the more that you practice it, the more you are honing your capacity to be with yourself and to hold on to yourself. Because it's very easy to get taken out of ourselves in this world with all the social media, all the stuff of the world. What I was saying at the beginning about expectations of how we're supposed to be in the world and what looks correct and right. And it's this lovely way of just coming more and more into who I actually am and feeling the capacity to hold that. It actually builds self-worth. It builds inner kindness. It's extraordinary how it happens. It's I want to say like magic, because all you're doing is, and I shall describe now what menstrual cycle awareness is. It is the art and practice of being aware of your menstrual cycle emotionally, physically, and so on. And it's about knowing what day of your cycle you're on each day. And day one is the first day of bleeding. And it's always knowing the day of your cycle and getting to know each day, just tuning into the quality and tone of that day. What are the energies like? What your feelings are like? Because lo and behold, you'll notice that you can be quite different in different phases of the cycle. And as you practice cycle awareness, you get to know your pattern of energy, the times when you feel most energetic and alive, and the times when your energy is lowest, where you might tend towards feeling slightly depressed and think there's something wrong with you. But actually, it's just that moment in the cycle. Usually it happens towards the end of the premenstrual phase as you're coming into your bleed, because that's when our energies can be lowest. And being able to just clock those moments, you respond. You don't pathologize yourself. You don't say, what's wrong with me? You go, oh, yeah, I'm just in that low moment of the cycle for me. And I just need to slow down and be with that rather than forcing myself to be something else. So it is both this charting of your mood and energy through the whole of the menstrual month and cooperating with that energy as best you can. Sorry, I'm just so delightfully distracted by the presence of your child here.
Yeah, she's 3 and she's still breastfeeding. She's coming in for a little snack.
It's so nice. I can't not comment. So you start to learn to cooperate with who you are each day. And of course, it's easy to cooperate with the days when you've got lots of energy and endless capacity to be there for others. And that's usually around the ovulatory phase of the cycle. And, we can be the perfect mother there for our children because we've got the most energy, and our energies go outwards to the world, and our own needs aren't amplified, they're quieter. But then you'll find at times in the cycle when you just don't want to be around anyone, which could be hard if you're a mum and you're the fact you're a breastfeeding mum still, and you suddenly think, oh, geez, I just want so lost in time and space, and then you get irritable and reacting. And instead of judging yourself, you go, oh, yeah, this is the time when I'm more sensitive. Again, it's premenstrually that happens. I'm a bit more sensitive at this time, which means I just can't be with people in the same way. And so you bring this kind of kindness energy in, and you start to make choices with your life that accommodate for this as best you can within the context of the life that you are living and the responsibilities you have. But awareness is radical. The awareness just changes the lens by which you look at everything. And it softens and makes everything just this kindness thing that comes in. And then from that place of awareness, you will feel you have more choice instead of feeling so powerless and the world is against you and it's too much and you can't cope. And yes, we all have those moments, but it's held within a context, a meaning making context for you. Sjanie, do you want to come in and add some embellishments here?
I just think one of the perspectives that I really appreciate about having a menstrual cycle. So Alexandra very beautifully described how it's this kind of umbilical cord to ourselves, which of course it profoundly is. And equally, what's happening when we have a menstrual cycle is that there is this creative force, this natural intelligence that is informing our biology, our chemistry, our mood, how our brain works, the kinds of perspective we have, the kinds of capacity and power we have access to, is all being shaped and informed by the creative intelligence of our menstrual cycle. And there is a very specific order to that. Firstly, it's cyclical and it follows a very distinct archetypal pattern, a sequence, which we talk about as being the map of the inner seasons, the sequence of the inner seasons of the menstrual cycle. These are the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, which are mirrored in the 4 seasons we see in the year. So what I love about thinking about that and experiencing that is that I am being touched by and changed by and shaped by this natural creative intelligence. It's moving me every day. It's changing me every day. It's informing me every day. So yes, I'm in touch with myself, but I'm also now in touch with the intelligence of life through my menstrual cycle. And that is an almighty power to behold. It's really quite something when you stop and think about it. But even just when you let yourself feel the place you're in every day and trust it, what you're doing is allowing life to live you, to guide you, to inform you. And that gives us such a different experience of ourselves and a much kind of deeper sense of trust and safety and belonging. We feel we're part of something. We're being moved like the seasons of the year are being moved. We're not separate. We're part of this great orchestration. And I find that to be a very beautiful thing to remember.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're both so poetic when you speak. That's why I'm like closing my eyes. I'm almost in meditation. It's so beautiful. I As you're speaking, it's really just reminding me of this moment in time when I was reading your book, and being on the pill disconnected me from my own inner self, but it also disconnected me from nature because everything was so fast paced. I didn't even have time to look around and appreciate. And the world that I was in was very plastic, like the military setting, for instance. But I was in the city as well. So everything was just very plastic. And I remember reading your book and just seeing things so differently and excited to communicate not only with myself, but with nature again. And the way that you describe the seasons, the phases of the menstrual cycle was so much easier to digest than when I've been shown a chart with the cycle. That is very helpful. But in my brain, for me, the seasons really helps me because I can tune in. Like I was born in England, so I know the seasons very well and I can tune into them so nicely. And that question of just checking it in every day, like, where am I at? What is happening inside of me? And it does make that space so that we can be more forgiving as well with things that come up. Because as you mentioned, like I have my menstrual cycle back. And I was reflecting yesterday that when I go, so right now I am on day 20 and I can feel that I just want to get tucked up in a little cave. Like I want to sleep longer in the mornings. I can feel myself going in. I can feel myself like not as interested in interacting in baby talk and things like that. And before I know, I would have felt guilty. I would have had an expectation of what it would mean to be a mother, to be me and showing up in a linear way every day. And now I can be forgiven. And because my partner's in on this too, he understands as well. So he also picks up where I'm not stepping in for her, but also she is seeing, she's understanding just by witnessing me. Like she knows when I'm doing certain practices, she sees my blood. She knows that there's certain times when this is happening to mummy. And it's just so beautiful because I never experienced that. I don't think I saw anyone like my mother's period blood, maybe if it was in the bin, like on a pad or something, but I know it wasn't something that we really got into. And also I just love the seasons because it is with my daughter as I'm raising her, I'm using the nature to bring into our altars, to bring it into our ceremonies. And so this is just another way to have that link. And it's so much more interesting and nourishing on all levels.
So right. It's very beautiful to hear how you are letting this just be part of family life, which is as it should be. That's really lovely, Danielle.
Mm,
Yeah,
quite the journey. Eh? So
sure is.
I wondered if you could just get into this noticing
Mm.
during the cycle when we have more of a tendency to, when we feel more sexual, when we feel more like we want to interact with the world, and this comparison to when we don't, we want to, when it's winter.
Actually, when you were speaking, so I am answering your question, I think, but I'm just something from what you were just saying just now about the changes through the cycle and how on day 20 you suddenly felt like you didn't want to get out of bed, you wanted to be more inner. And you brought up the whole inner seasons imagery, which just we just love, of course. The bit I wanted to bring in here is that yeah, you were suddenly feeling like you couldn't maintain that good mummy role that you'd been able to have of just being there, completely there for your daughter. And you were coming into another kind of energy. And I just emphasize that each season has its own kind of powers. Each season holds powers. And some of these, so it's not like any one part of the cycle is a sort of weakness or that you're somehow not capable of doing what you're supposed to be doing, AKA mothering or whatever it is. It is that you are coming into a different set of energies or powers, and they require a different skill set to care for. When you come into the premenstrual phase where you are now, this is the inner autumn, as we like to call it. Now, that's been so judged, that autumn, as problematic. We're more difficult, we're reactive, we're more angry, we're really, all this. And we have all sorts of trips going on with ourselves of we're not measuring up or whatever it is. But if we understood the dynamic of what was happening in the second half of the cycle and could slow down, and this is the particular skill you need for this autumn phase to be able to activate the powers here. If you could slow down, you would, it's like a gear change. gear change. Each season requires a gear change. So now you don't want to get up in the morning. That's, gear change moment. I've got to come at the world slightly differently. I can't be Superwoman 10 juggling 50 things at once. Now I have to do something differently. So autumn requires just slowing down. And in that slowing down, what's happening is you're negotiating the fact that you're actually becoming much more sensitive and permeable. You're less sensitive in the ovulatory phase, the inner summer. You're becoming more sensitive and you've got more access to more knowing within you, more instinctual powers within you. But if you haven't slowed down enough, those powers just come out as reactivity and overwhelm and too much. But if you can slow down, you will feel yourself coming into another kind of strength, like an authority, a deeper knowing about things. And you can often speak real truths at these times. You can say difficult things at these times. And we're not always loved for that. But it is an amazing power. It's like we have extra sight. We're more almost psychic at these times. It's those kind of powers that come through. But if you can't accommodate your life to be with those energies, then it turns up as trouble, PMS, etc. So really what I'm alluding to here is that you are going to discover through cycle awareness that at different times of the cycle, you have access to different experiences within yourself. And so you mentioned sexual energy. And this is going to vary from person to person, I have to really say here. But classically, the ovulatory phase is seen as a kind of peak of sexual charge. But that may not be entirely so for everybody. Some people, particularly just before bleeding, some people get incredible sexual urge, or even premenstrually. Or what you'll note, and there'll be moments where you don't even want to be looked at or even touched. And that may be very particular to you. Or there'll be perhaps a more innocent type of sexuality, possibly in your inner spring phase. But you're going to discover the different phases, or faces rather, of your sexual energy and the times where you most are hungry for it. And there are times where you're not interested. You're off doing other business within yourself. And that can be so singular. And to discover that is so liberating, and so liberating for a relationship when you let your partner in on that. Because of course your partner's going, what have I done wrong? And they haven't done anything wrong. It's just that there's something different that you're having to be with now, or want to be with. So of course our sexual energy changes through the menstrual month. Our need for a connection with others changes. Our sociability, if you like, the times where we'd like to party all night. Not that I want to do that anymore. That's a post-menopause. But or times where you just, as you said, I want to sleep in. But that moment also when you come into menstruation, where you just want to stay under the bed covers and just off the edge of the planet. And Sjanie, you should come in here.
Just to say, so what Alexandra's talking about here is that there is an archetypal pattern in the menstrual cycle, but that everyone has their singular sort of take on it. A bit like there's an archetypal autumn, but autumn can look a whole number of different ways. And in a way, practicing menstrual cycle awareness is about you discovering when your sexual energy peaks, or when you like to be sociable, or when you feel the most need for space. And there will be very common themes that so many of us share, but actually ultimately it's each person's own journey of self-discovery and journey of self-knowledge. So this is very much about you getting to know you through the practice of cycle awareness. And there's one other thing I want to pick up on there, because I've never heard you say it quite this way, Alexandra, and it's really good. You said how in these different inner seasons, it requires, a different gear, like a gear change for each inner season, but also it requires a different way of behaving. So every inner season requires a certain kind of behavior, certain adjustments to your behavior, but also a different kind of speed or mode of operating. And that really reminded me, and you'll appreciate this, Danielle, having grown up in England, me being a South African, it took me a horribly long time to learn this. The weather here can be awful. And I always used to walk around being like, how do people survive in this country? It's just miserable. And then I heard that saying, which I now know is a very well-known saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, only the wrong clothing. So I figured that one out now. And it's true with the menstrual cycle. There's no such thing as a bad season or a bad phase. It's just us not meeting that season in a way that allows it to shine, that allows it to be what it wants to be. Yeah. And so it's really good to remember that, because so much of menstrual cycle awareness is to do with dropping our prejudices around this is the good half of the cycle, which for many people is the first half, from menstruation up to ovulation through the inner spring and in the summer. And the second half, the descent of the cycle, for many people is the bad half. Not always, but that's often times. So it really helps us to drop those judgments and discover what's possible there. Yeah.
Mhm. I love that. And when I'm working with my menstrual cycle, I always have, so I have a chart with reminders of certain rituals and practices. And I suppose that's like put in my coat on if it's cold outside or my hat on if it's sunny. And I have these practices and rituals to give me a moment in time to tune into what's actually happening, like a remembrance, because life can just go so quickly. So in these moments, I get to see like where I'm at and how I'm showing up for myself. And if I need to make my family more aware of what is happening, because the month just goes so quick, it can feel like I was on my period yesterday. So it's like when I tell my partner, no, I'm going to be on my period soon again, it's like, it felt like it was just like 2 days ago. And I'm like, yeah, that's because, life's moving fast and we have a kid. But one of the other things I wanted to share was I've been doing a lot of work with my father wound throughout the years. And one thing I found really interesting from doing this work was I noticed that I was promiscuous in the spring phase. And this promiscuous energy was more about attention and using my sexuality, but not really wanting to have a relationship with the person. So this was before I met my partner, just to say, everyone. And just is listening at the door before you, honey. And so, and what I realized was in this phase, I feel very playful and very vulnerable almost. And there's this link to my younger self. And I realized I put some things together and I was like, oh, I actually wanted to feel safe because in my spring phase, I had this feeling of unsafety that I was like a little bit out of control. What would link to my childhood? And I didn't have a dad. So I would like move towards the masculine. And the only way I knew how was through sexual energy. So in the spring, I always thought, oh, I'm so like, that's when my libido's high. But on reflection, it wasn't that. It was another need that needed to be met. And so from finding that, I was able to go deeper and see what was the real need that wasn't met as a child. And I found this so beautiful that I've looked into this on each of the phases. So even in that autumn, I had a really adverse connection to women who would speak their truth in a way that was powerful. So whenever I heard that in myself, whenever I heard this more of a stern figure, or just saying this is how it is, I didn't like that in myself, and I would push that down. And I would much prefer to be in the spring when I felt like people liked me more. So it's so interesting passing through and seeing my people pleasing tendencies rooted in a deep needs that I didn't have met as a child. So my menstrual cycle, bringing awareness to that and linking it to my childhood has been, wow, so healing for me.
Mm, yeah. That's a very beautiful insight that you've had, very rich. And it's really pointing to, and we don't have many places where we get to talk about this actually, but that menstrual cycle awareness is a practice and process that is profoundly healing. And that's exactly what you've discovered, is that when we start paying attention to our cycle and what comes up for us in the different phases, we realize that each cycle is illuminating both our power, but also the shadows or the aspects of our power that we haven't yet come to really inhabit and embody, which often is because of how our development and how our growing up in some way was challenged or stunted, or what we had to face or meet. We've all got chinks, we've all got bumps, we've all got big gaping holes in our system where we weren't loved or met in the way we wanted to, or where we were shamed and diminished, or where there was like an absent father figure, as in your case. And all of that will show itself through your cycle if you're paying attention. And in our experience, and it sounds like this was true for you as well, Danielle, it unfolds at a pace that is right for us. There's something about the awareness we have when we practice menstrual cycle awareness that feels mostly manageable and digestible. Occasionally, we have whopping things come up, which of course feel almost too much. But because the practice of menstrual cycle awareness is so embodying and has a kind of built-in trauma safety device, I want to say, because it's really keeping us connected to our nervous systems and our own capacity to stay soothed and present. There can be a very beautiful healing that happens through cycle awareness. That's been my experience, and I've been practicing it for years, but every cycle, every month, there's new material
Keeps
that is
on
out.
giving.
It keeps on giving, keeps on. So you've made some beautiful discoveries, and by the sounds of it, some new places in yourself because of it. It's very beautiful.
Thank you. And I agree. I think it does come the right time. And because of the seasons, it allows us to let it unfold naturally. I've been working with my menstrual blood recently and painting with it. And the beautiful thing is seeing the colors change and seeing how it is to work with it. And I'll show you my piece from this month. It's very
Yeah.
interesting because I don't know if you can see this. It's like an eye.
Mhm.
So this is the one that I painted this month. And my last few months has been very intense emotionally. And I noticed it in my blood. It was a lot more clotted. The color of it was different. Working with it was different. And it took a lot as I was painting, things were coming through because it was intention to sit there to see, to be with it without any expectations. But because of that, it held space for memories to come through, for me to soften in places that maybe I was being too hard on myself. And I just feel that there is so much when we become more present, we become more creative. And through that creative, like channeling in, like plugging in, there's so much is revealed. And it is just, I just see it within my own circles, within my friendship groups. It is just the biggest gift to share the practices that I'm doing and to listen to their practices and to hear the stories come out that may have never come through because maybe words were not put to the feeling inside. So every time we sit and we listen, there's new things that come together. And through hearing other stories as well, they help to guide us to words that are feeling inside. And then that feeling is seen and it can come through and be truly seen and held and loved. Yeah, so I just thought I'd share that.
It is very moving hearing how you're working with your cycle. Actually, when you mentioned the rituals that you do to acknowledge your shift in the seasons, it's a wonderful honoring of yourself. And that act of honoring, and we will do it in different ways, because I'm probably aware that there may be people listening who aren't into that kind of thing. But that act of honoring almost it loosens the inner soil within us even more. Because I loved what you just said then about as you just sat with the blood, it felt like we're painting with it, how more could come through. It feels like you have developed a presence and a patience with yourself, or the rituals allow you to have that presence and patience with yourself. And the act of doing that allows things just to show themselves. It's not like you going, what's wrong here? And letting your mind, on the contrary, your mind will just push it all away. It's actually just this being with and the simple observations that you start with. And just on the subject of the change in the blood and everything, and you'd had a very stressful month, the menstrual cycle is the stress sensitive system in us. So when we have a stressful time, that's where it'll often show up first, perhaps more premenstrual reactivity or inordinate fatigue when we bleed, or that change in the blood, the clotting, the darker colored blood. Those are signs that the body is under some kind of
Mhm.
stress. Yeah.
It's very useful to know. And I think this is one of the great powers of the menstrual cycle that has been lost, which is that the menstrual cycle is giving us feedback all the time on how we're doing, on how we're living, how well we're taking care of ourselves, how on track we are with what matters to us, and how honest we're being with ourselves and with our partners and all of it, everything. We're getting feedback all the time. And what shows up in the different inner seasons, and particularly the premenstruum, is just like a report card on that. So if you want, you can go to a coach or you can turn to your menstrual cycle and say, all right, let's do an assessment. How am I really? Sit with your premenstruum and you'll get the most powerful mirror on what needs tending to in your life and where course corrections and reality checks and get real talks are needed. So, yeah, it's very powerful just in that way.
So true. And I know that you are doing a podcast now, right? Because I'm thinking people will be like, I want to stay on top of this. Like, I want to tune in more to what is happening and learn more. So, would you like to share about the podcast?
It's hosted by Sophie Jane, who works with us at Red School, and Alexandra and I are often guests, and then many other people that are interviewed all around this topic of cyclical living and menstruality. And it's called the Menstruality Podcast. So you can find it in all the usual places, or you can come to our website, redschool.net, and you'll be able to find the podcast there. But there are tons of really good episodes. We've got a good library now on all sorts of topics. We've got one for each of the inner seasons. We've got ones that go into menstruation in particular. We talk about healing menstrual symptoms. There are lots of conversations about menopause, leadership, creativity, and menstruality, you name it. Yeah, you could really indulge yourself if you haven't discovered it yet. Hours and hours of menstruality pleasure.
That is incredible. Well done. Well done. So, would you like to share where people can find you? Although I will put everything into the show notes for you. But if you would
Mhm.
like to share what you have available, I know we spoke about your books and your podcast, but yeah, you go for it.
Yeah. So redschool.net is our website, and also we're at red.school on Instagram. Those are two good places. And we have actually a really good place to come is to our free course called Love Your Cycle, which teaches you about the inner seasons and how to practice menstrual cycle awareness. It's a really good way to start to learn about what we're talking about and begin to awaken the power of the cycle and build a relationship with your menstrual cycle. So it's called Love Your Cycle, and you can find that on our website, redschool.net/love, I believe. Yes, and our books are Wild Power, which is about the menstrual cycle, and Wise Power, which is about the power of menopause. And is there anything else we want to highlight, Alexandra? We have a whole curriculum of courses and offerings and events and a really buzzing community of people from all around the world. If you want cycle aware company, come to Red School. There's lots of people who are really into this work. Yeah. Anything else, Alexandra? Or is
No,
that
I think just mentioning the community is really great.
yeah.
It's this work is amplified, the potency of this work is amplified manyfold over when you're sharing it with others.
Yeah.
Just takes off.
Yes, it's always a
Yeah.
reminder as well, because it's easy to forget to ask to
It is.
check in. So when you've got people who are also on it, yeah, I should check in. Where am I at today?
Yeah, exactly. It really
Yeah,
helps.
me too.
Actually, the thing I should mention, and we have this starting in a couple of weeks, is our menstruality leadership program. So that is a very deep dive over 13 weeks for people who are wanting to really embody the power of this work and bring it into whatever they're doing in the world, whether that be circles or into their other work. So it's the first step if you want to go on and learn the facilitation skills that we offer. So for anybody who's very turned on by this work and kind of goes, yep, this is me, this is what I'm called to do, I want to be one of the teachers and leaders in this work, then it's the Menstruality Leadership Program. And
When does that start?
it starts on the 22nd of March.
All right, so I'll try and get this episode out before then. So
Great. Yeah, bookings close on the 14th of March. Not sure you'll get it up before then, but maybe you will. But we run the program annually.
Oh, thank you both so much. I feel like I could speak to you forever, ever. When I'm just talking and listening to you, so much comes up, and I'm just truly grateful for you channeling this into the world and receiving this information from within and putting it into words so that other people can consume it as well and find out how to get in touch with themselves, because that is one of the biggest things. What are we actually feeling? What is happening on the inside, instead of going to somebody all the time to tell us like, oh, this is what is happening. No, we can do it from within. Like, beautiful.
Exactly, Danielle. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm just loving all you. I just love listening to your cycle awareness practices. Actually, truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. It's wonderful to hear how you're working with your cycle and over the years, and also through the whole initiation of motherhood and the hiatus of your cycle, and now with your cycle back. You've been through a lot since discovering our book, Wild Power, and I can feel in what you share the self knowing that's alive in you. It's your daughter is very blessed to have a mama who's so tapped in and really awake to this. Yeah.
Thank you. And I always think with her as well, like, this to her isn't going to be new news when she grows up. It'll be part of her life. So for me now, it's so like almost magical. Like, I'm doing these rituals, and because I need to do that to like make it feel important almost, I'll do it. But for her, it'll just be like, okay, we're doing this. This is part of my routine.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. They get to reap the harvest of our work, and that's the way it should be.
Exactly. We're doing this, and it's fun. So thank you both so much.
Brilliant, Danielle. Really. Just a pleasure to connect with you, honestly.